talk about all the Hall of Fames Kevin's in it, right? Don't
you know?
And that, my friends, we are live.
That'll take up about 30 seconds.
Tom said you were at 42. That's 42 more than I am in.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I've just said recently that, you know, when you get older, people talk about, you know, what goes first. Is it your legs, your hair, your teeth, you know, what, like your eyesight, like what goes first? But you know what goes first? It's your audience. Your audience goes first. Now, I say that because
we're live.
I've been a storyteller my whole life. Okay. Now, so when you go to parties and stuff, you know, you kind of hold court a little bit and you tell stories. And I've noticed, you know, a lot of my stories have got a little mold on them now, you know, because they go a long way. So when I tell stories now, I see people's eyes, they glass over a little bit, you know. So
funny. I mean, I have a funny story about that.
I'm losing my audience.
You'll love this. You guys will love this. So this is my story. So I have a lot of crazy stories, as you know, that have happened to me in my life. And I will pull them out, and I'm not the most comfortable guy at parties at all. So I will start to pull these out once in a while when I just get, you know, like bored or just feel like no one's talking about anything but politics or whatever. And I'll bring out some crazy animal story of some animal that I ran over or inadvertently killed, or all those various things that I've done in my life. And my wife's reached the point where she has two modes on this. Like sometimes she'll tell me to just stop. She'll look at me and she'll be just like, no. I'm like, what? And I'm just telling a story. No, don't tell that story. And it's like, you know, she's lost all sense of, you know, of like, you know, just social kindness. Or if we're at a party that really sucks, she'll force me to tell stories. So there's two modes. There's either like on or off. And yeah, it's the funniest thing. So my kid.
Do you stop telling the story when she says you stop, or what?
Yeah. If I'm not telling a story, she'll be like, "You need to tell stories. This is getting dumb."
What if she tells you to stop, though? Do you stop or you just keep going?
Oh, I stop because I'm already humiliated as it is. Like, you know, that's like 100%. Like,
as a reporter, I can't let that go because you said you've got stories about animals you run over and then animals you inadvertently killed. So run over animals that you haven't killed.
Well, I did. I know. There is one. Okay, so I was in Florida. I'll tell this quick story, and it was right after, between Christmas and New Year's. I had flown down there to visit with family who was already there. I'm driving alone in a rented car, like I want to say 2000, right around 2001. And it's one of those foggy Florida where you can barely see 5 feet in front of you. I'm tired because I've been up all day and pretty much most of the night. I'm really exhausted. I'm driving in a foggy car, and it sounds like the transmission just drops out of the bottom of my car. Like, I'm like, oh no, what have I done? You know, like very crazy feeling. So I pull over. It's a rented car, like I said. I look under the engine, everything's fine, and I'm walking back to the car, and I see on the road upside down an alligator flopping like this.
Oh, jeez.
Your wife just called me. Actually, told me to stop.
Yeah, thank you. So I walk. This alligator was upside down. Okay. So the dilemma of me, like being an animal lover, do I approach this and try to help this? But no, I mean, it's an alligator. So I like take one step. I'm like, no, I can't do that. So the alligator then, as I take one step towards it, rights itself like it's like some kind of Marvel superhero, like just like completely rights itself like that, and then looks at me and walks towards me. I'm in the car, out of there as fast as you.
So an alligator. Do you think he had no injuries, or what happened?
He had no injuries. I think what happened was, an
alligator was playing possum.
He was small enough that he went between my wheels, and I think I just flipped him. But I heard him. I heard him hit the bottom of the car a little bit, so he definitely hurt. It hurt him, but it did not kill him.
Wow.
So an animal I ran over but did not kill.
I gotta say that's a quality animal story. Like, you know, that's not one I
million of them.
No. In fact, I'm confident in saying no one that I know has ever hit an alligator with his car, his or her.
There you go.
I'm really confident.
Ex-wife. Where's ex-wife? Get her.
Yeah,
let's talk hockey.
Yeah, please. She's not watching the show, or else she would have called by now.
There is a hockey team named the Gators, isn't there, in the East? East, you know. So.
All right, well, let's get into this. We will start. It'll just be Mike and I, and then I'll introduce. You can do the Kevin. You can do the Kevin thing, and then I'll introduce Tom. And how should we do this? So confusing.
No, let's just introduce. I'll start off. Tom goes second. Kevin goes third, and you go fourth.
Let's do that way, and I'll talk about Tom and Kevin thing. Okay.
Yeah, just introduce yourself, Tom, after Mike does.
Good.
Yeah, so after you say that, you don't get to go. You're slightly more important than Mike, and not as important as Kevin.
I got it. Okay.
All right. So, you know. All right. Here we go. Ready? Hello, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, August 1st, 2017.
I'm completely unimportant Michael Agello.
So I guess I'm Tom Laidlaw. I don't know if I'm important or not. I kind of think I was important, but I'm not anymore. I used to play in the NHL for 11 years and New York Rangers and LA Kings.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today, and my wife will tell you that I'm not the least bit important. So anyway, let's.
And I'm Macklin, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. That's the podcast that comes every Monday.
Are you important?
Time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And today we are happy to be joined by the duo that call themselves Laidlaw and Allen, and are doing a new podcast that's on HockeyBuzz and is phenomenally funny and very, very good, and really worth listening to. And when I say this without like any hesitation, that you are two of the funniest, more interesting people I've talked to in the hockey world for years. And to have you both on the same show is just like a recipe for something. Like something's got to happen.
Your life sucks, then, Nick.
I'm telling you. Thanks, Tom. But I'm telling you, something's going to go on. How did this start? How did this idea start, Kevin? Like with you and Tom?
Well, I mean, we had talked about. I've known Tom for a long time, and going back, obviously he was playing when I started covering the National Hockey League, and I remembered him as a player. But I don't recall having any. I didn't have a unique relationship with him, but when he became an agent, I got to know him really, really well. And, we've just sort of been friends and for a long time, and we've always looked for an opportunity. And Tom does this kind of fun thing on Instagram where he gets up at 3:30 every morning and starts coffee. And it's become sort of an in thing on Instagram. And
that's awesome.
People have said to him, you need to get that unique brand of humor out where people can enjoy it. And he and I talked about doing, a podcast. And, our podcast is about hockey, but, what makes it work is Tom is a conservative. I'm a liberal. He's a player. I'm not. We have different perspectives on the way the game should be played. And, we have fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously, but seriously enough. And, like today, you'll hear us talking about Scaramucci being, drummed out of the White House, and we go from there.
I love it. No, this is great because it's something that we want to do that kind of show. Mike's a conservative. I'm a liberal. We actually have run into this issue before.
11 days that shook the world. Scaramucci.
Yeah. So but we get yelled at when we do it. But I think it's great when a show just comes out and says this is what we're going to do, and it's fun. It's totally entertaining, obviously. And Lord knows you talking politics, you'll do much better than we do talking hockey. So that's all I can say.
Well, we don't talk. We don't. I don't want to get too.
I know.
It's a political show. It's a hockey show, but
it's a hockey show. But
we just use the fact that. Scaramucci lasted only 11 days to talk about, who might last only 11 days going into the NHL season. So, today, that's what we talked about.
We cover some important stuff too, though. We talked about Phelps and the shark, the fake.
Oh, yeah. We were all over that. Yeah. All over Phelps and the shark. So
one thing, first off, Tom, I want you to respond to the fact that Kevin never really had to interview you for any reason over 11 years as a player. Was that because you were insignificant or just?
Well, I think it says more about Kevin, right? I mean, like, what is he now? Like, I think last count he's in 47 Hall of Fames now. Since we started the show, he got a couple more. So I probably wasn't important enough for him at the time. He was busy chasing Phil Esposito or Wayne Gretzky around the locker room. So I think it's more Kevin's issue than mine.
Now, are you not in the Brantford Hall of Fame? Is there a Brantford Hall of Fame?
It's a Brampton. Not Brantford. See that right there? That says it all right there.
That's terrible. I apologize, Tom. That was terrible.
I am in the Brampton Sports Hall of Fame. That's it.
Yeah. How about Northern Michigan? You should be.
Yep. And actually, they're inducting the 1980 team that I was on that went to the finals. They're inducting the team this year.
Oh, nice.
So that's.
I have to tell this story. I don't know if Tom will appreciate about that 1980 team. But when Tom got to Northern Michigan, the program was just starting. So they had a really solid group of incoming freshmen, a talented group. Rick Comley was the coach of that team, and they were really starting from scratch. And slowly but surely, they built that team. By the time that Tom got to be a senior, it was a really veteran group. The other key about that team is that Tom was clearly the leader of that Northern Michigan squad. But there was a player that was coming in. It was a transfer student from Tom. Was it BU or Boston College?
BC, I believe. BC.
Yeah, BC. He was coming in from, and his name was Walt Kyle, and I think many hockey fans know that name. He's been a longtime college coach. He was an assistant in the NHL for a while, a real solid hockey guy. But he was a player back in that era, and he was a high character, highly respected leadership type player, and he was transferring into Northern Michigan. And he's told me the story of Conlon calls him in the office, and he wanted to be really clear to Walt about what his role would be, and he didn't want him thinking he was going to come in and sort of take over the team. And he said, Walt, I got to be honest with you. He said, this is clearly Tom Laidlaw's team. He's like the Pied Piper. When Tom says they go to the bar, they go to the bar. When Tom says we're going to play at 100%, they play at 100%. When Tom asks them to go through the wall, they go through the wall. So Tom is in charge of this team. You are in charge of Tom. And that was the key. And his idea was to make sure he kept Tom Laidlaw, in line. Because Tom, would you describe yourself as slightly wild, a little wild?
Free-spirited.
Free-spirited.
How would you have survived in the social media era, Tom? Like,
oh God, I would not. I'd be back on the farm. I'd be working with my father and the firefighter. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I love when Kevin tells that story. It's very accurate too. But so we went up there like way back in 1976. There's all these Canadians and Minnesota kids and Michigan kids going up there to school, and we're all freshmen. So there's no seniors around to guide us. So we did some interesting things. Our Coach Conley was very patient with us, but it would not work today. That's for sure.
Well, I'll get Tom to tell this story too, because it's a good one. Most of our fans, I'm sure, know Don Waddell, who was the general manager of the Atlanta Thrashers for most of the time, all the time they were in Atlanta. Yeah. And then he's now, of course, president of the Carolina Hurricanes. But he was a member, a defenseman on Tom's team, and he was also one of Tom's good friends. But that did mean, as I recall, did you not throw a stick at him in practice? Tell that story.
I was very driven. Since I was like 6 years old, my goal was to play in the National Hockey League. So we got that close, and we had a really good group of players there. And first 3 years really didn't do much, but by the time we got to the senior year, we were ranked #1 in the country and everything. But leading up to that, it must have been like sophomore or junior year. So Don was a very talented player, a great friend of mine, great teammate. But he was dogging a little bit one day in practice, and my temper got the best of me, and I was expecting a little bit more effort out of him. So when we were doing down and backs, and when I got down, he was still back at the blue line. I turned around and I might have lost my grip on my stick a little bit, and it came towards his head. So, but we remained very good friends. But he was. We had some great times. It was funny because we were just such a bunch of mudheads, right? Starting off as freshmen, and to see the evolution to now go to our senior year. But some stories that actually they've had a few reunions. The guys got together to tell the old stories, so it's a lot of fun.
The one thing, I guess we're probably going to get together for this 1980s thing, right? For the university.
Yeah, we're trying to get up there. It's in September, so we'll see what happens.
There you go.
I've got now. This may not happen, but I'm invited to maybe participate in. You ever see the TV show Amazing Race?
Yes.
So they asked the NHL to find a couple of NHL players to.
Oh my gosh.
Go. So we put our name in, and we haven't heard back yet whether we're going to participate in it.
Oh wow, you should. If anybody out there knows that, we got to make that happen. Anybody out there?
We can call Jerry Bruckheimer and get to him. Then it's
get him on it. Because we'd be surprised who watches the show. Sometimes we have a lot of
Jerry Bruckheimer's too busy trying to get an NHL team in Seattle.
I had to share the one story that I've shared, Tom, about you that probably to more players than any other over the years, and I want you to tell it because we talk about like the draft now and how players, are there at the draft and stuff like that. And the story of what happened when you were drafted. Tell them.
So when I was drafted, it was a 20-year-old draft back then. So it was 1978.
Right.
So I'm 20 years old, and I'm back in Canada. I'm working on a horse breeding farm, a standard bred horse breeding farm. And it's a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, I can't remember, but I'm out cleaning the crap out of the stalls. And obviously no cell phones or anything like that. So the Rangers had called my father. They drafted me in the 6th round. I'd called my father at our farm. He then called the other farmhouse. They went and got me out of the stall. I got mud and crap all over me and like that. I walked into the house, and my father gets me on the phone. He says, "The Rangers just called. You've been drafted in the 6th round." And I says, okay, well, what do I do now? He says, well, get back out there and finish cleaning the crap out of the stalls. And so that was my draft day of the National Hockey League. It's funny watching today because these kids, come from all over the world, and the suits and the preparation that goes into the draft and everything. So to go from that.
I have told people this story players who've said, should I go? They were nervous about whether they should go to the draft or not. They're like, do they want to just hang out? They want to be the disappointment of going to the draft and not actually getting drafted, and the fear that they have. And I've told this story, and I'm like, I said, that's what, that really you don't have to go. If you're not sure you're going to be drafted, you should, this is you have a great story. Be doing something else that day. Just do something else. Don't sit around and wait and look around.
Well, I think about it really. Listen, I understand why it happens, but it's a great thing for the National Hockey League to have all those kids there. But as an agent, I saw some people leaving that building, families and kids, crying, in the suits and drafted.
I have a good friend whose kid was supposed to be like a really high draft pick, but over like 2 years going into the draft, completely started to fall, and just fell and fell and fell. And then eventually, he still went to the draft. He still had hope. There were a couple teams and didn't get drafted. It was just a really, really sad story. He did actually manage to get into the NHL though, he played in Europe and then played in the AHL and played a couple games in the NHL. So, there's other ways. The draft isn't everything, obviously, but that was you knew the draft was going on that day. So what were you thinking when you were doing all that shoveling? You had to be nervous.
Yeah, because like I said, I dreamed since I was 6 or like a lot of kids, 6 or 7 years old, to play in the National Hockey League. But it's funny back then because you see these kids now, they're coming up and they've got all this contact with NHL players and they know what it's like to be in the NHL. Back then we had no clue what it was like to play in the National Hockey League. There was 21 teams, obviously not the social media and all the access to the players and everything. So literally you're dreaming what's it like in a National Hockey League dressing room? You just had no idea what was going on there. So it seemed like you're so far removed from it. In fact, I remember when I first walked in the Rangers locker room at the end of my senior year of college, and the Rangers had brought me in. I was going to sign my contract and then go down to New Haven and play in the playoffs. And I walked in the locker room, and the first jersey I saw was Phillips Mazzito's hanging up. And man, I remember watching him in the '72 series, for Canada and all the times up to that. So I was just in awe. And then there's a day of a game. And actually, he walked into the locker room, and I could see him whispering to the trainers, asking who I was and everything. And he was so nice because he was his second to last year of his pro career, so right at the end of his career. And he was really nice. He walked up to me, and he's at least, he was pretending that he knew who I was. He really didn't. He says, "Listen, Tom, I've heard a lot about you. You're a pretty young player and everything." So when he did that, I was just like, I could have died and gone to heaven right then.
That's an interesting point about the visibility of the game back even in the 70s, that in 79, 80, that was 37 years ago. And I went, I was getting out of college and I took a job in Arizona. And I've told this story before, but to explain how far hockey has come in the United States, you have to think back, when even into the late 70s, the only way to actually follow the NHL, if you were a fan in the United States, because the newspapers did not do the job that they do today, was to get the hockey news. And when you would go to a game, and I grew up in Detroit, and you'd go to Olympia Stadium, you'd have to get there when the gates open, and then you would have to rush and go to the souvenir stand and stand in line and wait for them to open, because they would be sold out of the hockey news within, I would say, 15 minutes. And that was the only way to follow. So when I get out of college, I go to Arizona, and now I'm working for a real live newspaper. So I've got access to Associated Press on a regular basis. The Wire would come, and I could read all the stories. But I was in Arizona. I still couldn't follow the NHL. The Associated Press would only do one paragraph per night on every game. So, what was going on in the league was simply a rumor. I was dating someone who was still back in college at the time, and she used to send me clips so I could sort of follow the NHL. It was really impossible, to do that.
Mike, what's interesting about this is I wanted to pass to you about this because, Mike, we talked to you about the other day, Mike, about the fact what you used to do back then, which I thought was I'd never heard this before. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this before, but what Mike would do to get his stats back then.
Well, I used to send to the NHL. I used to ask them for the statistics because at the end of the year, if you missed the last edition of the regular season of the Hockey News where they had the final stats, if you missed that edition, you were screwed. And I at 11 or 12 years old, I was playing Stratomatic hockey, and everything was based on the statistics, on shots, on shooting percentage. So I sent a letter to the NHL saying, can I please get the final regular season statistics? And they sent me the book of the 21 teams with the breakdown and everything, just like it was in the Hockey News. So that was the only way I could get the stats. The Buffalo News didn't print them up. But to your point, Kevin, it's funny because my older brother was in air traffic control school in Utah in the late 70s, I think 78 and 79, and he was completely reliant on me to get his hockey information. He couldn't get the Hockey News out there for some reason, so he would call me like once a week, and I would give him like what the Leafs did in the games, who looked good, who didn't look good. When the draft came around, I would get it from Toronto radio, and I would write it down, and he would call me, and I would get. But that was the only way. It's a completely different world. I mean, that's 40 years ago, but it's a completely different world now, where you can just go online and look it up on HockeyDB or something else, and it's just right there.
Well, you were podcaster number one. You were patient zero. The first podcaster was Mike. Getting information to do his brother.
He really was. I mean, because you would get stuff from them. You said, Mike, that wasn't just like you would actually get. Not that maybe were they doing plus minus at that point, but things that weren't in hockey.
Oh yeah,
they were doing plus minus. Yeah, and it was a complete booklet. It wasn't like the season, the guide that they would send out at the beginning of next year in a binder. It was just like basically a papers of all the printouts stapled together, and they just sent that to me. And we were talking before the show about the trade deadline. When the trade deadline came around in the early 80s, there was and Tom, you would know about this because it was based out of New York City, Sports Phone, which, a guy like Don LaGreca, who's on ESPN radio right now, was on Sports Phone, and it was a 914 976-1313. I remember the number. And every 10 minutes on the trade deadline, I would call up that number to find out, because they would list off the latest trades. And then, of course, the next month, my mother and father would get a $170 phone bill because it was New York. And they're like, what the hell was going on here? Well, but I was trying to get the news of the trade deadline. I needed to get it.
It was a different world back then.
Since you guys do,
following the statistics was a lot more fun back then too, because there were more of them. Like teams were scoring. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers scored 400 goals. So
right.
Your team, and a lot of teams were scoring in the 1980s. So like your favorite player, if he wasn't a star, might still get 20 goals.
Well, I looked this up, and I think it's interesting. Tom was drafted in the 6th round in 1978. The only 3 players who were drafted after him who played in more NHL games. One is a Stanley Cup. Oh, 2 of them I believe are Stanley Cup winners. One, and all of them were either coaches, assistant coaches, or general managers in the NHL. You want me to give them, or you want me to give you a hint?
Can you guess this one, Tom?
Oh, I'm thinking right now. Can we have some clues?
Yeah, the first one was started with the Montreal Canadiens. I believe he played for Minnesota. I believe he won a Stanley Cup with the Edmonton Oilers, and he was a longtime assistant coach. Keith Acton. That's Keith Acton. Nice. Next one, played the majority of his career. He played with Winnipeg. I believe he was a line mate of Dale Hawerchuk, and he's a former NHL Coach of the Year.
Oh.
He's currently an assistant coach right now, I believe, in Anaheim, or was until recently.
Coach in Ottawa, big guy, mustache.
Paul McLean.
Yeah.
Paul McLean.
Yeah.
Right.
And this one, former GM of the Edmonton Oilers, won Stanley Cups with the Rangers and Edmonton. But played also in Boston.
Not Sather. No, he's older than that.
Craig McDavid.
Oh, yes.
Craig McTavish. So you probably played with these guys in juniors, I guess, Tom.
Yeah. Actually, I tried out for the Canadian Olympic team 1979 before the 80 Olympics with Jim Mullen and Paul McLean too. So
if you had made the Olympic team, there would be no Miracle on Ice. Is that what you're thinking?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, they made a huge mistake there.
That team did not do. I mean, they didn't obviously have the success that the U.S. did in that Olympics. But that team, I think Glenn Anderson was on the 19.
He was on the team.
Yeah, that team did pretty well.
You know who got cut from the U.S. team? He wasn't the last cut, but who was a part of it? was
Joey Mullen?
No, he signed, turned pro. He was the only guy that Herb Brooks, Joey Mullen was, Herb Brooks wanted that he didn't get. He turned pro, and he ended up not playing in the NHL. He went, I think, to Salt Lake City, as I remember. But one of the guys who got cut in that, not one of the last cuts, but long into the program was Don Waddell. Yeah, he got cut. There's one good story about Don Waddell that I think is just really fascinating. He played one game in the NHL. He played with the Los Angeles Kings, and not so long ago, his wife was looking to give her husband a unique Christmas gift. So on a lark, she called the Kings and said, my husband played way back and forever ago, back in the day, as the young kids say today. And is there any chance that his jersey could still be around? And they said, well, we have for years, and Tom may even know the guy, have sold our jerseys every year to a local guy. And he has, all the, the inventory. And so they gave him the number, and she called up, and apparently there was not a huge demand for Don Waddell. So he actually still had Don Waddell's jersey for one game.
The additional thing is, I was at that game. It was in L.A. The Rangers were in L.A. that game. He got one shift. He played one shift. Ron Greshner, who was a fantastic stick handler, right? He's stick handling in a phone booth, though, because he never moved, but he could beat everybody stick handling. He went down on Donnie Waddell as his only shift. You could tell Donnie was totally nervous. Greshner went around him. Donnie was laying on the ice. Greshner goes in and scores, and that was Donnie's only shift that he got, too. I went back to the bench because Greshner and I were buddies at that point. I said, Gresh, that's my old buddy from college. You just ruined his career. That was his only shift.
I haven't heard that story, and I thought I had heard all of Donnie's. When I said before about when you get old, first thing you lose is your audience. The reason you lose your audience is nobody under the age of 35 knows what a phone booth is, Tom.
Yeah, you're right. Good point.
Right. My son just had that discussion the other day. It was really funny. He's like, what is a actually his thing was even worse. What is a home phone? Because we have not he's never had a landline in this house since he's been alive.
If you ever would come and visit me in Michigan, you would actually see one. We still have a home phone.
It's so funny.
You're not surprised at that, are you?
I'm not surprised at all. Now, I've got two questions for you guys that we've been talking about that I thought would be fun for you to debate. One is, first of all, it's a little political and fun, but it doesn't have to be political in terms of politics, in terms of meanness or picking a side or whatever. But who is the closest personality in the NHL has ever had to Donald Trump?
Harold Ballard.
Mike's answer is Harold Ballard. Okay.
So you're okay. It doesn't have to be a player, right? Just
doesn't be a player. Just has been a part of the NHL.
Well, isn't Brian Burke in that category too?
No. Brian Burke's too smart to be Donald Trump. Harold Ballard was a curmudgeon, a mean-spirited cheapskate. That sounds like Donald Trump to me.
Yeah.
Pretty
well, I'm going to go, if we're going to do owners, I'm going to do maybe Bill Wirtz. If we're forced to do a player, I'm going to do Tiger Williams.
I was going to go Eddie Shack if we're going to go.
Yeah.
Ooh. The entertainer. Okay.
Yeah, entertainer. Yeah.
Interesting. I like that. Those are good answers. Now, my other question is this. We had this debate last week, and I thought it rose the ire of our fans and our readers. Now, because I put out there the question that in the year 2035, the NHL does another top 100 of all time list, okay? And on that list, who is ranked higher in 2035, Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid? And that's my...
it'll be Connor McDavid, but I think it'll be closer than people think.
Even Connor McDavid, because the three of us said Austin Matthews, actually.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be Connor. I mean, he's a great player.
I abstained because of me being...
I'll give you my reasoning. Tom, you go first, and I'll give you my reasoning for Austin Matthews.
Well, I just think Connor McDavid is such a dynamic player. I agree that Austin Matthews is a fantastic player, and maybe
me too. Yeah,
he might be even more a complete player. He may be a better defensive player too. At the end of the day, I just think Connor McDavid just brings people out of their seats so much. Not that Austin Matthews doesn't, but I think McDavid does.
He does, but think about these lists and how they were developed the last time we saw the top 100 list. And think about the fact that you have it's not just about who the most more dynamic player, who the most exciting, or more even top higher scoring player. You have to think about the victories, the Stanley Cup victories, the Olympic possible victories. That I think plays into it a lot with these guys.
Yeah, and like the thing with currently, if you put Toronto and Edmonton side to side, and obviously things can change, injuries, other situations, trades, but I look at what Toronto has done right now in a little under 2 years, and what Edmonton has done over most of the last decade, and the contracts and situations in Edmonton compared to Toronto. And I think Toronto is better set up to win a Stanley Cup because of the fact that, you know, they don't have the burdensome contracts that Edmonton still has on their salary cap. I mean, you know, good luck trying to get a lot for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I think he's a good player. He's not a $6 million player. They've got a couple defensemen who are making way over what they should. And, you know, one benefit of the Maple Leafs is that they use their financial might to buy their way out of bad contracts with like Dion Phaneuf and a few others, and they've buried them on long-term injuries. So I think the way they've managed things, and now they have a player who's in the same realm as McDavid. If they can build around Matthews, I think the Leafs can be more successful than the Oilers going forward.
I can't argue with
that. But but you know, McDavid's already an MVP. Matthews is going to be a 10, 11, $12 million player shortly. I think I like where the Maple Leafs are at better than the Oilers too. But the problem when you run into is when you do this kind of thing, it sounds like you're demeaning Matthews.
Oh yeah, no,
they're both great players.
I think we're doing that. No, I don't. We all, yeah. That's.
I just whatever it is. McDavid has it. That Crosby, Gretzky, Lemieux have.
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying Matthews might have it, but it's a little less clear. I mean, he's a great player. You're splitting hairs, but I don't know. What do you think, Tom? I don't know.
Well, I think that's it. Matthews, is that he seems more like that quieter guy. It isn't as dynamic on the ice. Still, the results are fantastic, but like I said, I watch him play. He just seems to be such a mature player at both ends of the ice already. Not that McDavid isn't, but McDavid, I see McDavid, I see end-to-end rushes, great plays. Yeah. Matthews, I see the smart little plays, the good defensive plays, the all-around leadership kind of thing. So, you're splitting hairs, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't mean to demean McDavid because I think he's.
Oh no one is. I mean, none of us are demeaning.
Yeah, no.
These are two
generations. I thought you were demeaning McDavid. I thought he was really going after McDavid, kind of tough guy.
Yeah.
He's a fine young man. I don't know why you go after him like that.
You want me to go after him? I will right now. All right, so here we go. Here's another thing I'm going to bring up. And like you said, maturity rate. So maturity so far, I feel like Matthews is a more mature person/player than McDavid. And I bring that up to a couple of things. And the one thing we had this experience in Philly when McDavid got hurt. Who was it? I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the player who hurt him. The defenseman that ran him. McDavid claimed that he ran him into the boards, and that McDavid's shoulder injury that happened 2 years in his rookie year happened in Philadelphia. And oh man, I'm drawing a blank on the freaking player.
Don't worry, I'll find it.
Sorry, there's an old
Brandon Manning.
Brandon Manning. Okay, Brandon Manning is one of the nicest guys you ever meet. He's not the kind of guy who would try to hurt a player on purpose or anything like that. He really doesn't even talk trash on the ice that much. The Flyers, I think, would like him to do that. So he gets tied up with McDavid, and they end up going into the boards. McDavid separates his shoulder. A year comes back, and McDavid goes right after him right away and says all this stuff about, and Manning's like, I'm not. And then Manning says something to him. Just at that point, the hockey thing catches. Oh, fine. You want me to hurt you again? That kind of thing. He does say that. And McDavid makes this a public issue all throughout and talks about it. And it becomes something that almost, it felt immature to me in general. It felt, below McDavid to get into that kind of stuff. And I couldn't see Matthews.
But remember though, he is immature. He's at 18 years old at that, or 19 years old at that time too, right? I hear you. I didn't like that either, but he's 19 years old, right?
So, 19 years old, but Matthews is so mature. So we're comparing these two. Well, Matthews first, the big game that Matthews had, remember he had all these goals, and then in overtime they lose the game because he misses an assignment. Right. And the first thing you hear from Matthews is how upset he is that he missed that assignment. Like that's the first thing. And that to me was just really mature for, for the moment.
Well, I have to say that purportedly during that game, during the next game when they faced each other, Manning supposedly said to McDavid, "I did it on purpose." He was doing it to get underneath his skin. And when somebody says that, I'm going to get pissed off. So
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, but X Point's a good one though. He made it public. That should
He did make it public.
He kind of broke the code.
He did break the code. And Manning may have said something, but I think Manning would have said it almost. Maybe he was just going to go out there, but it didn't seem like there's nothing in Manning's personality that would say that he would be the guy. Like that was like a Qadri type move or something like that you would see that and make that play.
And I'm glad you brought up that act, because I think that the only chink in McDavid's armor last year was early in the season he played against Qadri. Qadri got in his kitchen. He hit him. He did his usual Qadri mouthing on the ice. It clearly bothered him. People were saying when McDavid played against Qadri, McDavid was smiling on the ice like it didn't bother him, and it was clear that it did. And like if that's the only chink in his armor, then he's pretty damn good, because Yeah,
I remember early. I tell you, I played against Miro Lemieux when he first started in the league, and he was a soft guy. I mean, you could take him and pin him against the boards, and okay, I'm gonna punch you in the face and all that kind of stuff, and he'd just stand there and he wouldn't do anything about it. Now, obviously, he turned into Miro Lemieux, right? I mean, they're young players. If that's the only chink that McDavid's got,
and he doesn't have, and maybe he doesn't have the guy, to back him up or something like that in Edmonton, or maybe doesn't feel because he feels like he's got to fight his own battles or what have you. But he's not like, even in the World Cup of hockey, like the World Cup was interesting, seeing all these young guys together and seeing how they interact together. Like in the World Cup, I, for example, noticed that Nathan McKinnon was a lot more physical than I thought he was. That he could, if he was in the right situation, wouldn't necessarily have. He could actually be a power forward. And in that situation, again, Matthews was really young in the World Cup of hockey. Hadn't played and he was nervous. McDavid, was trying to run the show, but some other guys came out really. I'm not. Again, McDavid's one of the most talented guys in the world. I'm just saying that we're looking at this list.
Why are you picking on that? Why are you saying all this?
When we look at this list, 30, in 2035, I could see Matthews having a better overall career, perhaps, having won more Stanley Cups with Babcock, perhaps maybe even taking the USA.
Here's the thing about those lists. I voted on the last one.
Right.
We talked about it then, but, the numbering of those players, obviously they didn't number them, but there was like two kinds of players on that list. There's the first 70, obvious, that just deserve to be there, and it's sort of splitting out. And then there's the second group, which is the group where it really matters whether you won or not. Like, it doesn't matter whether Marcel Dion won a Stanley Cup. We all know he was a great player. But if you're in that 71 to 100 category, then all that stuff matters. Like Dale Howardchuk didn't make that list. And the reason he didn't make that list, in my opinion, is he didn't win. Because when you're down that group, there are another 80 players that are trying to get those 30 spots. And it really matters whether you won or not. So my point in telling that story is, a lot of it is going to be dependent upon, what they do and how successful they are in terms of the gold medals or, winning Stanley Cups and, the individual trophies and stuff. Let's just say the Edmonton Oilers never get it together and never win, and the Austin Matthews leads Toronto to 5 Stanley Cups. Well, that will be his opportunity to, as I think Mike made the point earlier, he could be thought of as being, a better player just for that reason.
And one thing about Matthews' maturity, and I saw it firsthand. I mean, he was always made available before games and after games, but the Leafs had a policy for rookies: no interviews during games, like in between periods. They protected him. He was completely professional. For a 19-year-old, he handled it with amazing poise. But it's gonna be, you're gonna see more requests this year for Matthews from the media, and we'll see. I think he'll handle it fine, but we'll see with the increase. He's clearly the franchise cornerstone. People are going to want to talk to him all the time, and we'll see how he handles it. I think he'll handle it fine, but they're grooming him to be the team captain. They probably won't name him that until next year, but the attention and the pressure will be more and more on him as it goes forward in Toronto.
And the media is tough too. Those, like the writers from USA Today and everything, they're tough.
Well, yeah, especially them. Yeah, with the national deadlines and all that stuff.
Those pains.
Here's my next question for you guys, and it's a perfect question because I've debated this with Kevin before, and we have a former player agent in Tom who represented players for a long time and played in the game. I believe that a team should offer sheet Leon Draisaitl. Okay, we've had this debate many times, and the response I get, because Leon Draisaitl, I believe, is a superstar. I see him as a top 10 player in the NHL, and I see nothing that you can possibly. Kevin's already turning away in disgust. Now, all the reasons Kevin will give me, I know, and I'm not gonna make you go through it, Kevin, very much. But I want to know an agent's perspective on why a team shouldn't offer sheet Leon Draisaitl.
Well, it's funny. Like a lot of times, you don't even consider offer sheets because if a player is that good, in most cases, you just would assume that the team that holds his rights is just going to match the offer, which they have the right.
Right.
So to try to talk a team into, from an agent's point of view, to try to talk a team into putting in an offer sheet, you kind of falling on deaf ears a lot of times. It's just, I know it's there. It's a tool. So again, so everybody knows an offer sheet is a player's a restricted free agent, and he now can get an offer sheet from any other team in the National Hockey League. His team then has the right to match that offer. If they match the offer, then he stays with his team. And it's also like it's like kind of an unwritten code, right? It's almost like, okay, if you make an offer to one of my players, now you really hurt my team, right? Now you forced me to pay a salary that I don't want to, which is a good strategy. Maybe a team in the same division, you force the team closer to the cap so they can't make as many moves. But the payback on that, I just think would be as a general manager, you really ostracize yourself. All
right, let's talk about payback for a second. Let's start with that point. The Flyers offer sheeted Shea Weber. Remember this? This happened. They went after Shea Weber. Nashville has never retaliated in any way, shape, or form. And I can never see them retaliating in any way, shape, or form to the Flyers. I have yet to see the retaliation that people talk about as being an actual thing.
Oh, well, it has been. You look at St. Louis, David Backes. Who was the other player?
Steve Bernier.
Yeah. They just went back and forth. Now, again, you did that to David Poile, who's one of the nicest guys in the league.
Right.
I would try that to Lou
and Holmgren, who's friends with David Poile, right? Like Holmgren does it to David Poile. I mean, these guys are close.
Yeah. But I the problem is nobody is going to. I mean, that's one of them. Playback is one of them. But no one is going to do it because everyone is going to match, because it would be suicidal not to.
Right.
If you don't protect your players, your assets, then you're going to be. Then other people will pick at the carcass.
I disagree, and this is why I know I'm never going to seem to win this argument. And someone, if you're out there, comment on this. Back me up, somebody, because this is the thing. All right, a team is going to
his wife's on the phone. She's backing him up.
Let's play this out. A team.
But she does. But she wants them to stop telling stories.
Yeah. Okay, you won X. Stop.
Okay, yeah. A team that's going to be able to do this. First of all, take into consideration that if Draisaitl was on another team that didn't have a $13 million player already, I would feel differently about this. But they already have a $13 million player. So if you give Draisaitl the max that's potentially more than McDavid is getting, you really put the Oilers into a spot where they have to consider whether or not to match. Okay. That's number one. Hold on, let me finish this thought. The other thing is the team that can actually do this is going to be a team that's not necessarily a great team because they've got the cap space to do this and they're in a situation to do this. Mm-hmm. Edmonton's looking back, are we going to mess up our salary structure? Are we potentially going to get, all those first-round draft picks from the New Jersey Devils? To me, that I think that there's no, now you could say, okay, why would the Devils give up all those draft picks? Well, the Devils come back and say, we could have all those draft picks, but the best we would hope out of one of them is to turn into Draisaitl, and that would be 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. So with the Devils, you're getting the guarantee that you want to get out of those draft picks anyway. And for the other team, you're not screwing up your cap structure, and you are getting potentially really good players at lower prices. So.
Well, David Poile took the draft picks on the Scott Stevens thing way back,
right?
Years ago, and he has been quoted for many years saying he regrets that decision.
Right.
He would have been better off with the player. And the problem is there's just too many reasons. It's not going to work. You mess up your own salary structure. Usually, if you do it, you're not a great team anyway. And then if your other top players get offended, it's messy. I think they would seek retribution depending on the situation. And and I'm not the only one that says that. Craig Custance, who's a fine writer, he works for The Athletic, just did this story, and he basically went through the same, rationale. It's a complicated thing. It takes time to do it, and you're pretty confident it's not going to work. I mean, the only person who thought, I remember you and I talking to this in Shea Weber, and you were convinced that they weren't going to match. And I remember talking to Kenny Holland about it, and and the thought was as well, maybe because the Predators at that point, their ownership situation wasn't as stable. Like, would they take out a loan in order to do this? And Ken Holland made a great point to me. He said, every team other than the Toronto Maple Leafs and maybe the Rangers would have to take out a loan to make this deal. Nobody has $25 million, sitting in a vault, in the office.
Right.
So it's just what you got to do. And, he just thought there was zero chance. And I did a story, if you remember, and no general manager that I talked to thought that they weren't going to match. So it was like an exercise in futility. I remember quoting, or I didn't quote somebody because we did back then. We weren't doing unnamed sources, but I remember talking to a guy who just said, I don't even know why he would do it. I mean, there's zero chance that he was not going to match.
And if you look at one of the few examples where the team didn't match, Edmonton with Dustin Penner, he had one good year in his tenure in Edmonton. He had a 30-goal year in one of the years, and then he ends up getting traded to LA and wins a Stanley Cup there. So that didn't pan out, and they gave up more than a few draft picks for Dustin Penner, thinking he was going to be that power forward that could make a difference, and it turned out not to be that. So the risk reward is not there. The only positive act is, like, if you're a team like Calgary and your rival is Edmonton, and you find a way to screw them by signing Draisaitl for, say, 1 year for the max, and it ruins them, and they would have to do something else, then maybe that you can use it as a weapon.
Well, that's where I would see, okay, that's the retaliation aspect of things would be real.
Right.
But to me, this is the thing. Why the Flyers did it with Shea Weber, I'm convinced this. I've talked to people about this. Is the Flyers were actually negotiating with Quill up the possibility of trading for Shea Weber. That was happening at the time, I was told, and the Rangers were also talking to him at the time, I was told. And I think the Flyers felt as if the Rangers had a better chance of getting him, so they said, we're going to offer sheet him to make him he's going to either be ours, he's going to be Nashville's, but he's not going to be the Rangers. That was the story that came through me. I don't know, that's what I was told, and that I could understand why the Flyers were doing it that way. They were saying, okay, we're either going to get him.
What you're saying is they didn't think they were going to get him either.
Right.
So they weren't sure, but they knew that. The Flyers brought him in. I mean, I saw him. He was here. Like, they brought him here. He was, they embraced. They were like, this could be great. Shea Weber looked excited to come to Philadelphia. So the Flyers had some feeling, and this was Ed Snyder, who maybe was a little bit of a dreamer or whatever. He had some feeling that this could make this happen, but if it didn't happen, he wasn't going to be a Ranger, and I think that also played into it for them.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Keep him away from the Rangers, a team in your own division. Yeah, right.
That kind of situation. So, that's
funny. Listen, your stuff you're saying, it's not like it doesn't make sense. I got to tell you though, in all the time as a player and as an agent, I know there has been those cases we've discussed, but rarely is it really even brought up. It just seems like it's something that guys don't even consider anymore.
Well, and I think you can use this as a comparative. Like when we were in Chicago this time last month, or a little over a month ago, and the expansion draft was coming up, and everybody's looking at the available lists, and that George McPhee, he could pick these guys, and this team will be good. This team will be so good that they'd have a chance to make the playoffs. But they didn't factor in the fact that he's got to do business in the NHL, and if he takes these players and doesn't make any of these little prearranged little deals, that he's going to be a pariah in the NHL. And what did he do? He didn't take the best players available. He took, the guys that some of these teams wanted him to take, and he got extra draft picks for it. And that's the way you do it. I
don't think George wasn't worried about how people were going to look at him.
I'm just about to jump in there too. I had long discussions with George about that. If he felt that, he took James Neal. He took some of the players that he wanted that they didn't want him to take. Mostly he took the deals because he felt of the long term that was the best deal. Now, was he cognizant of some of the relationships he had? Sure. But like I think I think he did a phenomenal job. But weren't all of you surprised that he didn't take Dumba?
Don't you think in the end the GMs are professional enough to know that McPhee's got to do what he's got to do? I mean, it's like, I mean, that's where he's at. I mean, they don't want him to take those players, but you know.
I saw Ray Shero get interviewed, and you could tell he wasn't too happy with the way it went down. Like even on behalf of some of the other GMs, but he said, "Listen, George did what he had to do. He did a fantastic job, man."
Yeah, right. He did a great job, and that's it. I mean, we're going to go in a minute here, but I just want to very quickly. But I wanted to say, I mean, the whole thought process of this to me is how hard would the NHLPA to then argue? Okay, we're just going to get rid of this next CBA because it's pointless. No one's doing it. No one wants it.
League would be happy with that.
League would be happy with that, but would the PA allow it?
I don't think
the league team don't want to get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah, I think the PA will always want to keep it in there in case there's special circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, and should then they negotiate it to be like, is it baseball or basketball? We were talking about the other day that has that you can make offer sheets and the draft picks aren't a factor. That you can make an offer sheet and all you have to do is match to keep them, but the draft picks.
I think it's just such a non-factor. I don't think it's even discussed. Yeah.
I think you keep it in there because there's always the player, you know, the Dustin Penner. I mean, to me, where I think it could be effective if your organization thinks more highly of a player than another organization. Like you identify a player who you think is underutilized, that is, you know, given the right circumstances, could be ineffective, and then you offer sheet him, and then the other team said, well, I'd rather have a second round pick than that.
Right. I can see that too.
So you got to keep it in there.
I think you got to keep it in. I don't know. It'll be always a source of debate, and thanks for debating it for a second, even though I know it is kind of ridiculous. But to me, it also it still bothers me, and I think I didn't read Craig's article, but I'm imagining the same kind of thing. It bothers me that this exists and is viewed as this, you can't do that to upset somebody thing, which seems to me like a very unprofessional thing in general. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. We do have to go, but so remember, Laidlaw and Allen, it's a podcast on Hockey Buzz. It's right below. You can see the latest episodes are always right there. They're hilarious. Make sure you follow it. Make sure you read it and check it out. And because I'm telling you, as you saw in the beginning of the show, it's got to be one of the most entertaining thing out there. And two people who you can't get enough of, arguing with each other. You're two friends for a long time. It's a perfect thing.
Kevin's in 57 Hall of Fames right now.
You gained 20 while we were on the show today. I know. While we were here. And so, Tom, where do people follow you on Twitter and Instagram?
At T-Lades on Twitter and Real Tom Laidlaw on Instagram.
There you go. So make sure you check that out. And then Kevin is by Kevin Allen on Instagram. You're not on Twitter. You're not on Instagram, are you?
I'm not. I should be though.
There you go. That's all right. No one's. You're not a 15-year-old girl. You're okay.
What are you saying? I'm a 15-year-old.
And you don't get up at 3:30 in the morning.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying Kevin isn't. So that's all.
Protein coffee at 3:30. Protein coffee at 3:30 too. All right. So let's go.
There you go. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We'll talk to you later.